Hello, and welcome to Activate Presents Grow Your Mind Chat Sessions in collaboration with GoLabs. I'm your host, Anam Sethi. Welcome to the show. Before we bring on our guest today and go deeper into a very relevant conversation on artificial intelligence, deep learning, and young leadership, I want to share a little story with you about my day today. I woke up this morning bright and early, which is not something that I'm used to doing, by the way, to record a video session, a video learning session. If you've seen these videos, you may find them on websites such as edX or Udemy, where instructors will come on and explain certain concepts. And this was the first time I was doing this video. When I got the script yesterday, 24 pages of information that I had to somehow commit to memory and then deliver to the camera. I was extremely petrified. And I remember thinking, this seems impossible. I have a gym show scheduled on Friday at 5 p.m. here in Lahore, and I'm supposed to spend the day somehow managing to record a 20-minute explainer video in just a few short hours. Having done that now, I can tell you it was extremely taxing. But sometimes, we tend to make situations seem bigger than they really are, to somehow make problems appear to be bigger than they really are. At the end of the day, if we can really stretch ourselves and maintain a positive attitude, we might end up pleasantly surprising ourselves, as I did today. Now, we're going to learn a lot more about stretching ourselves, aiming for seemingly impossible tasks with our next guest. He is the Chief Innovation Officer at I50, where he leads the development of a proprietary computer vision powered digital twin for manufacturing processes. Yes, I read that because it's tough to understand, and I'm sure our guest will help us understand this a bit better. He has an educational background in artificial intelligence and robotics from the University of Pennsylvania, where he did both his undergrad and graduate studies. He has spent over 4 years working with multiple Fortune 500 companies, and he has been awarded the Forbes 30 Under 30 accolade in enterprise technology. So without further ado, please welcome our guest, Khizer Hayat. Khizer, it is absolutely lovely to have you on the show all the way from Canada today.
Oh, thank you, Anam. It's a pleasure being on the show.
All right, lovely. So, Khizer, we were talking about this a little before we went live. I was telling you how tough it is for me to understand your role and what you do. But before we get to that, I really want to ask you, what inspired you to pursue artificial intelligence and robotics at UPenn?
So that's actually an interesting topic. I got into my undergraduate program as a mechanical engineer, and I was pursuing economics at that time as well. And one summer, one of my friends inspired me to conduct research in the field of robotics, and I was kind of trying to figure out where I wanted to do my concentration in mechanical engineering. And turned out that summer I ended up working on a robot that transformed. So my personal I loved Transformers cartoons when I was young, and I was a big follower of them. So actually working on something that I was watching on TV and actually seeing it transform inspired me to pursue the career in that particular field because it just sounded really cool and something I really enjoyed doing.
Wow. So, can you tell us about this little transformer of yours? What did it do?
Yeah, it was pretty small. It was just a tool that could become a screwdriver, a wrench, or some other hand tool. That's not very impressive when you look at what you see on TV. But for me, it was big because we could have it do this in an automated fashion and change configurations, and it just showed me the potential of this field in the future.
No, no, trust us. It's a very big deal because I think most of us might not be able to do that. But I'd love to learn more about your journey so that once you graduated, with all of this knowledge, where did you go and what did you do?
Absolutely. So my journey actually started in Pakistan. So I went to the HSM college from grade 2 to the end of my A levels. And after that, I ended up at Penn. And I think I've kind of talked a little bit about my Penn story. So after graduating with my master's, I ended up working in a large Fortune 500 manufacturer called Schlumberger in their manufacturing division. And at that time, I slowly started using basic machine learning to optimize production processes, helping them fix it up. And I realized at that time that, okay, this is not exactly robotics, what my passion was, but I'm still able to use AI to do some process optimization. And over time, I started appreciating manufacturing a whole lot more and the
Hmm.
potential of AI in the field. So about after spending about 4 years there, I decided that I had reached my ceiling in the company and it was going to be harder for me to innovate because big companies kind of do have these ceilings and processes in place. And I decided to join my first startup as a CTO there, where I was developing their bottleneck management system, which is essentially an analytics tool. During that time, my current co-founder and I met and worked together, discovered a brand new problem in manufacturing that I had always known about, but the
Mhm.
technology at that time wasn't mature enough in terms of deep learning and computer vision. But by the time we met and we started talking about the problem, the technology had already matured up. So we decided to kind of separate from our current startup and then start I50 and solve the problem regarding manual production processes in manufacturing and utilizing computer vision to solve it.
Lovely. So, if I may ask, what was that manufacturing problem then? If you could go into more detail about it, and how did I50 come out and find a good solution for it?
Absolutely. So it's actually a pretty straightforward problem. So manufacturers are really good at gathering data from machines because
Hmm.
machines generate data continuously. But over 70% of manufacturing tasks are manual, which means humans are actually doing those tasks. And you can't generate data out of humans. You can't just plug in something and like collect data from a human being. And the way it was currently being done is someone would go onto the production floor, take a stopwatch, and measure how long a particular process takes. The problem is this can only be done once or twice a year, which means you actually don't get a true picture of your manufacturing environment. So
Hmm.
what we did is we replaced that with computer vision. Essentially, we put cameras, and the cameras actually act as a stopwatch, mapping the tasks with their times, and then give manufacturers insights, so they can actually do what they're supposed to do as optimize processes versus just standing on the floor, clocking someone, measuring their activities.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I think I kind of understand that. And I have a follow up to that. You've sort of answered it, but I'd love to know more. So, why is this so important today? Now, I understand obviously the point that you mentioned that people were originally doing this, they were using stopwatches, and that seemed kind of outdated. But what other challenges were associated with doing manufacturing in a more human, in a more traditional way?
So one of the key challenges that manufacturers have is the margins they operate on, so the profit margins. And typically, most manufacturers in a large number of verticals actually operate on very, very small margins. So you can look at it somewhere between 1% and 2%. Of course, there are outlier industries, but for the most part, the margins are very small. And the reason they do these time study activities is to improve the flow of their processes. So the less time they spend performing a particular task, that the less cost they have, and then also the less time it takes, the more revenue they can generate, because now tasks are being done faster, so they can make more parts per hour or per day or whatever. So having good visibility into the processes allows them to achieve profitability, higher profitable margins, and increase their revenue. So they can reduce costs and increase revenue at the same time. But data is key, because if you don't have good, accurate data, you can't improve something. And that's where we kind of came in to give them this real-time continuous data versus what they currently have, which was just a snapshot of the actual picture.
Absolutely. And I think I sort of understood this on your website as well, where you were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, industrial engineers who would go out into the field and record this data. And since it's a lot of data, how do you process it? What do you make of it? Where do you store it? What do you do with it? And so I believe that then obviously being able to automate it and then effectively hand it over in terms of the results and the reports would make a big difference. Correct? Yay,
Absolutely.
that's one for me. I'm trying my best to understand it. Okay, so obviously this seems like a lot to do, but apart from just the technical aspect of it, I'm sure that there were also a lot of other challenges that you faced as a young leader, as an entrepreneur, starting off with this business. Could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in the world of startups, there's challenges from day one, and the challenges just keep evolving. So one of the first challenge was when we first started off this company, we had an idea of the problem we're solving, but we didn't really know how the problem would be solved. So computer vision came out not in the first iteration, but in the second iteration. And one of the first challenges was, okay, how do we sell something that we don't have to prospective customers? And for that, we had to kind of put our hats on. My co-founder did have a background in sales, but not from scratch. So we had to figure out creative ways of developing some sort of demos without an actual product to go sell to certain customers and raise funds from investors, because that's key initially to a business like ours. So that's one of the first challenges that we faced, convincing people to give us money to run a business as well as customers to buy the product. And our first iteration didn't really work out. So having to pivot, learn from the market, get feedback from what people are saying. And then we developed our computer vision platform after we heard from our prospective customers. And then we were able to convince investors as well with a well-formulated story. So the journey was definitely very tough. There were days when we would just be figuring out what is it that we can produce? How do we solve this problem? What will sell? So that's one of the major challenges that we faced. As we grew, the challenges evolved, came to, okay, what sort of people are we looking at hiring? What sort of, are they a cultural fit? What is a culture we're looking to develop in our company? Because as we scale up, culture becomes the most important part. The people are the most important part of a company. And so then we had to make certain hiring decisions. Along the way, we made some mistakes, of course. That's always part of the learning process, but figuring out a good process of getting people who will add value to the company, who are superstars and rock stars, who will continuously improve the company, and then keeping them motivated. So moving from a technical job to more of a managerial job, where instead of me developing the product, now I have people developing the product, but making sure that their creative juices are flowing. They're always motivated, especially during COVID times. And then, of course, once COVID hit, things changed, and we had to kind of redo our business strategy and figure out, okay, how do we approach the market now? And what's our focus, and what sort of areas should we be targeting?
Wow. So I'm going to probe here just a little bit. You mentioned that, one of the challenges was motivating your employees. Now, as somebody who is a young leader and a young entrepreneur, can you go into detail about how you managed to achieve that?
Absolutely. So I think something that I've found very key into motivating people is to actually really understanding their internal desires, what their achievement, what they are looking to achieve from their life, their careers. And this includes a holistic picture. It's not just what they do in the office, also what their home life is like. So having that level of empathy and really clearly listening. A lot of people who think they're leaders or think that a leader needs to talk more than listen, but I believe it's actually the complete opposite, because listening is a skill set that very few have, but it's very important as a leader, even as a manager, to be able to motivate your team members so that you really know what their desires are, what pushes them. And from there, you can kind of develop a plan in conjunction with them to say, okay, let's now work together and help you achieve your long-term goals within I50, and make sure what you're doing here is what you foresee yourself doing in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years.
That's absolutely lovely. This is one of those things where obviously there are a lot of challenges with being in a leadership position in general. Currently, there is a lot of conversation about the emotional burden of taking up a role like this. And, I really would love to know, emotionally on a personal level, how did founding a company, especially a company in a tech environment where everything is so competitive, how did that take a toll on your personal life?
So it is in the initial phases are tough. You're going into this company where you previously have a paycheck coming in, etc., and now you're kind of going in and doing this, and most for the early stages, not getting paid and trying to figure out like how you're going to end up making money. And that's the most challenging part initially. And then the challenges evolve. One of the key things I've noticed is having a really good support system, because if you go at it alone without, I would say, my co-founder, my friends, and then certain members of my family, such as my wife, some of my siblings, they've really played a big part in believe and helping me emotionally, because there's people I can turn to. So my co-founder and I were both going through similar problems because we both started a company. So I can't imagine ever doing this by myself. And I can't imagine doing this with a person I don't enjoy talking to and spending time outside the office with. I think that definitely was very useful because we were both going through similar emotional challenges, so helping each other through. And at the end of the day, it also comes down to having a ton of self-confidence in your own ability to be able to build something. And every time you have doubts, and I believe every founder, every startup entrepreneur, or every entrepreneur in general or a leader has self-doubts. But what gets you through it is actually your self-belief and how much you actually think that you're able to scale and build a business, and how confident you are in your own abilities. Of course, you have to put some realism in there too, because you can't just blindly do something. That's why you have the support system to kind of ground you. But at the same time, that self-confidence is extremely important in emotionally managing yourself.
Lovely. One of the reasons, there's a lot of conversation also about sometimes why certain people are able to take action when it comes to becoming an entrepreneur, and why certain people have ideas and they kind of get left behind. So speaking of doubt, did you ever, even for an instant, lose faith or confidence in your idea, in your vision?
So I would say I previously worked at another startup, and had I had any doubts, I probably would not have left that startup for another startup. I could have left for another big company because I would have been done with the startup. So as far as the vision was concerned, I was always extremely confident in the vision, and not just me, but my co-founder as well. And we both built off of each other in a way where we both were really, really confident about what we were trying to build. The how was still unclear, but the actual vision of what we could achieve, especially together, we'd never had any doubts about that. And we just really enjoyed working with each other, and how we were able to kind of give each other confidence and make each other better. And that's something that caused us not to have any doubts in the vision, but more trying to figure out, okay, how do we achieve this vision?
Lovely. All right. So just getting a little deeper now into this whole process, can you share, a little story or an incident, a moment in your life that broke you down or was exceptionally tough, and how did you recover from that?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of, I guess, stick to the whole startup theme because it's very relevant, and I think a lot of people have this sort of a dilemma, and it does many times, it breaks you down. So I believe one of the toughest things and the toughest decisions I had to make was leaving a good job at a big company, which had some perceived stability, to go and to jump into the startup world with a ton of uncertainty. And I will say that after I did leave the company, I was full of doubt at that point, and this is before my previous startup. And there were times when the support system was a little bit lacking, and there were times there was a ton of self-doubt inside of me about, okay, have I made the right decision? I'd wake up in the mornings trying to just like pull through, motivate myself, figure out, okay, how do I get through? What exactly do I have to do? And I think a couple of things that helped me was I started doing a lot more reading into motivational books, books about how to discover yourself and how to kind of figure out the why and what really pushes you, and discovering your inner motivations. I think that really did help me, apart from the fact that I started discussing these with a lot of my friends, and some of my family members too, who gave me this self-confidence to know that I could do it, I could achieve it, and failing is okay. It's fine. I was still young at the time, and too many times we're afraid of failure, and that's why we don't take risks in life. And I realized that at that was a moment in my life where I could make a big decision, try to take this big risk, and even if it fails, I still have time to get back on my feet. The world's not gone. I'm still young enough, and thankfully that move actually is the best thing that ever happened to me. And that self-doubt initially and breaking down and just not knowing what to do when I woke up in the morning, over time I practiced so much self-discipline that nothing it's hard for me to get back in that situation anymore, just because like I had to like exercise all these muscles and learn to control my emotions so well. So it was a great experience, and I wouldn't take it back. And definitely very good for my future.
No, for sure, absolutely. Just a while back, we were just talking, you had mentioned, when we were talking about motivating employees, we mentioned COVID. And before this show, you were telling me that I50 is about 2 years old now, which means very recently into starting up, this pandemic happened, an unexpected situation, and nobody really knew what to do. So how did you and your co-founder, sorry, collectively handle that?
So definitely it did hit us initially, and we had to figure out how our clients would react to this. Um, Thankfully, we have really good investors who are also really good advisors for us. And we initially began conversations with them to say, okay, what are the moves that we should be making? How should we be focusing our priorities? How should we be dealing with our team members? And essentially, they gave us some great advice about focusing on our existing clients, making sure we're having regular communications with our team members, being super close to them, telling them about being transparent to them at the same time, and actually telling them exactly how we're thinking, what our strategy looks like, and how we are always going to be out for keeping an eye out for them and making sure that they stay successful. And so we use this approach of open communication, high transparency with all of our team members and our clients. And luckily for us, all our clients actually wanted to continue working with us, expanding the relationship and continuing to grow what we were providing to them. And that ended up being a big blessing in disguise, because that fueled motivation within our employees who saw this growth happening, who saw these clients coming in, who looked at the more research opportunities that they could do. And based on that, the motivations levels did stay pretty high in the team.
That's absolutely great. Okay, so Khizer, now it's time to sort of pick your brain, right? There are a few things that I would love if you could help our audience and myself understand better. First of all, what is artificial intelligence? Just at the very basis of it.
So just at the core, AI is some artificial intelligence is basically programming a machine to do something that a human would do. It's a pretty broad umbrella, so there's different facets to it and different subsets in there. But just in pure general terms, it's basically making a machine more like a human.
And what are some of the ways that I guess in today's world, currently in 2020, that people like you and me are experiencing or already interacting with artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of separate artificial intelligence into two areas. One is narrow AI and the other is general AI. So what we're facing right now is narrow AI, which is AI for specific use cases. So at its simplest form, you can say on social media, you get these curated posts and curated ads. There's some machine learning artificial intelligence behind that, because they've looked at what you've clicked on, how you've interacted, etc., and they've given you those ads based on what they think that would be the best fit for you to buy. Same with, say, if you buy something off of here it's Amazon, I believe there it's daraz.pk or something similar. When you buy something there, they say, okay, we would also recommend you buy this. So that's how you're kind of getting interacting with AI on a daily basis. General AI is still, there's a ton of research being done. That's essentially making a machine think exactly like a human, so making any decision possible. And there's still a lot of research that's being done in that field, so we don't really see that much yet.
That's pretty interesting, and it perhaps or perhaps it doesn't links to my next question, which is, what is deep learning then? Is it somehow linked to general AI? Is it a process? Is it a system? What is it?
So deep learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, which essentially allows a machine to learn from data and then make subsequent decisions from that data. So to give you an example, um, you would basically feed pictures of dog, cat, cow, train, or something to this model, and it self learns and comes up with the optimal equation, so that when you show it a picture in the future, it will basically tell you whether it's a dog, cat, train, or whatnot. So in its simplest form, it, instead of you developing the equation, it develops the equation itself by learning different parameters from the data that's being fed in. It is linked to general AI because this development of an equation by the machine itself actually
Mhm.
allows it to think more like a human brain. So the whole idea of a neural network or deep learning is based on neural networks, which are based on how the human brain is programmed. And in general AI, the idea is that they'll have this very complex neural network, essentially mimicking the human brain, which allows a machine to make any decision that a human can do. So narrow AI, it can only do things like social network, I don't know, computer vision, or text analysis. General AI is basically a human being on its own, to be able to learn any task and make any decision that a human can do, but over time, better than humans.
That sounds kind of dangerous, is it?
So there's multiple thoughts on that. Of course, we've all seen the movie Terminator and how things pan out, but in my opinion, that's a little bit far-fetched. I think it's not going to be dangerous per se for human beings as far as killing us is concerned, but automating a lot of jobs that we have, that is a very, very good possibility.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen is a lot of tasks that are automatable, such as repetitive tasks, are going to be automated by AI. And for a time, humans, there will be a surge in unemployment in human beings, in more developed countries first, and then in developing countries. But over time, different skill sets will be required. So if you kind of look at a side by side comparison, there was a time when robots became big in manufacturing. And I'm going back to my industry because I know this the best. Um, and a lot of people did lose their jobs because tasks that were repetitive now got automated by robots. But then more jobs were created because now these robots required maintenance, they required programming, they required other areas, safety. So more jobs were created. But what had to happen was humans had to upgrade their skill sets to accommodate these new machines. Now with AI, I see a similar picture. With general AI, I believe a lot more jobs will be automated, except I believe the creative jobs, such as art, people who paint, people who produce music, those will probably take longer to automate. And that's something that could potentially be dangerous. And then that's more at a policy level if people start looking at universal basic income, because these machines are then going to make decisions for humans, for the welfare of humans. And those could automate away a lot of jobs, but it kind of depends on how governments deal with their policies to accommodate for those issues.
Well, at least it's refreshing to learn that finally somebody in the arts can have a little bit of a break, right? Because usually in Pakistan, it's considered to be one of the lesser careers, although it's absolutely fantastic. Crazy conversation. I'm actually really excited to learn all of this from you, and I'm so grateful that you came on the show. I know a lot of our audience is now wondering, what advice can you offer young people who are now wanting to take up entrepreneurial initiatives in the tech industry?
So I would say don't be afraid to take risks. You're still young. There's still time for you to make mistakes, and you will make mistakes, and don't be afraid of failure. I think growing up in Pakistan, I was there for 18 years. Failure is looked down upon culturally instead of being celebrated. And I think we should celebrate failure more, as long as we don't make the same mistake twice. And in the world of an entrepreneur, we should never be afraid of failing or taking risks. And to all the young people out there, if you truly believe in something, and I mean really believe, you need to really ask yourself, do I believe in this? and can I not live without the world seeing this? Go and do it. And if you fail, that's fine. It's a risk, but it's okay to fail, because you still have time to pick yourself up, and you will. It's that self-belief, that you just need to have that belief in yourself, and surround yourself with a supportive ecosystem. There's a lot of friends out there, family members, who will actually support you, who have belief in you, and who will help you through this. And that, I guess that would be my biggest advice, especially to the young upcoming entrepreneurs in Pakistan.
That's absolutely lovely. I have one final question before I will let you leave, Khizer, if that's okay. What are some ways that you practice? You mentioned reading, but what are some ways that you practice self-development, self-care, and learning in your life today?
Absolutely. So, apart from reading books, I do follow podcasts a lot. I make sure that I kind of separate out work hours with my own hours at home, and making sure that when at 5 or 6 p.m., some days it goes till 8, but I have a proper cutoff time, because I don't want to mix work with life. And secondly, I make sure that I follow regular exercising, just to keep myself mentally sharp, making sure that I'm going to the gym or working out at home, something like that. Anything that allows me to kind of get that endorphin rush going and keeping myself physically active and fit. So these are some of the practices I follow. And then, of course, I do tend to take my weekends off, just to kind of spend more time with my own family and make sure that I kind of am in touch with every aspect of my life.
Thank you so much, Khizer. This was absolutely wonderful. I can assure you that there's so much that I've learned today, things I wasn't familiar with, and lots for me to research and learn more. I think our audience is probably feeling the same way. So thank you so much for taking out the time early morning and helping us out today, learning more about your field.
Thank you, Anam. It's my pleasure.
All right, absolutely lovely. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This is the first time we've had somebody on the show who can really dig deep into artificial intelligence, deep learning, and help us understand the trials and tribulations of young leadership and entrepreneurship. If you want to watch that show again, highly recommend it. Now it's time for your gym task. So before you leave, there is something that I would like you to do. And this is obviously extracted from our conversation with Khizer today. Go out and fail. Do something this week that is probably not going to work out. Let yourself experience what it's like to not do so well. Pick yourself up and try again. I think that the one thing, if we've learned anything today, is that we shouldn't be afraid to take risks. And if you are uncomfortable with failure, it might be a good idea to start by failing small and getting used to it. After all, there's a long journey, a long way to go, and it's time for us to get used to the things that push us outside the box. I hope you liked our show today. Love your questions and comments. Like I said, you can always reach out to me at ActivatePK, and I will be there to take all your questions and queries. This is Anam Sethi from Activate signing off. See you later.